So maybe let's bring in everyone. Let's bring in HAYLEY and Dan in here as well. Let's have a shared conversation for the next 15 to 20 minutes or so. Dear friends watching us now, if you feel like you have a question that you'd like to ask, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the collaborative doc. I'm going to prioritize your questions above my questions because my questions aren't that as important. So I'm going to be very carefully selecting and curating those questions. Hello, all of you in the same space. It's incredible to see us all. I have a question. I like questions, I guess. We had these conversations. I think I had this conversation with Brad once, and he said, well, once upon a time in around maybe early 2000s, 2010s or anything like that, we started working around this idea of let's systematize, let's have these systems, let's have components, and even earlier than that. And it seems like at this point now, many people either have already tapped into design systems a little bit, or played with this idea, or maybe they already built one and then it's just abandoned and forgotten and lives somewhere in the outskirts of the ghost town, as Dan said, right? What is actually next? So are we in a position right now where would you say most organizations understand how to build a design system, how to keep it maintainable over time? Or is it still an ongoing battle that is not even close to be solved and we all have to get together to solve this? Anybody wants to take it first? I know that Dan has an opinion, for sure. Anyway, Dan, you want to start?
Okay, I can go first, yeah. I would like our industry's latest rhetoric around design systems being design systems as a practice. And I think that's a newish idea as applied to design systems, but it's an old idea as applied to other things. So if we look at other things that are analogs, accessibility is a good one. Like, is the accessibility battle won? It's not. Will it ever be won? Probably not, because it's an ongoing thing. And I think that it's a thing that organizations have to practice in order to create. Sure, you can create an accessible thing, but can you be accessible? That's harder. That's a thing that requires constant work. It's a journey. I think design systems are the same way. I think performance is the same thing. And I loved what both HAYLEY and Ben talked about from an organizational standpoint. Is in order to get your organizations to do that, it's not a set it and forget it thing. It's like you have to constantly work on it because things are changing. The market changes, the staff changes, the dynamics of your systems change. So I think that design systems are practices. And they need to be. I don't think that we'll ever get to like, we got like peak design system. We can put it. We're done now. I think it's
Isn't that how it works? Like you just pick up a material design system, you plug it in, and here you go. It's going to be maintained by other people, so we don't have to worry about that.
I've never seen it happen.
Okay. Yeah. HAYLEY, what do you think? What was your experience like in that case, or in general? I would say, where do you see design systems kind of evolving and going? What do we need to kind of be in a comfortable position with design systems, especially at scale, like in big organizations that you worked in?
Yeah, somebody said recently that a big part of it is unlearning. Some of the things that we've said design systems are in the past are sort of codified a certain dogma around the domain and the space. So I think that that's as much a part of it as it is defining what's next. And then the other thing I would say is, in addition to what Dan shared, which I also, agree with and mentioned in my talk too, around design systems as a practice. Another word that I keep hearing coming up is and I think this has been true for a long time, but just like making it more visible in design systems is this idea of context. And that a lot of these pieces and parts that we're canonizing are being sort of situated in certain environments. And so helping the teams that are designing better understand who are the people they're serving, what are the devices they're on, what tasks are they doing, and really, better understanding as well, just the idea of in order to design these things, it's not just about knowing about design or about engineering, it's knowing about SEO and optimization, knowing about like business levers you can pull. There's a lot more to it. And I'm starting to see a lot of people begin to bring some of those types of decisions into systems.
Right. Makes sense. And Ben, I also know, of course, that you did this incredible survey on design systems where you probably have learned a thing or two about what people struggle with most and what people kind of wish to exist in the organization. Maybe you could share a couple of things on that too.
Oh yeah, there's lots of takeaways from that. I think the one that really stood out to me, probably the biggest one that stood out to me, was that we asked, I remember when we were developing this, we changed it a little bit each year, and the team came to me and said, we want to ask these two questions. And one is, what is the biggest challenge you're facing? And they kind of had a list of, things that we've heard from folks that they're challenged with. And then another was, where are you focusing your efforts most? And it was the same list. And I remember thinking, well, if that's their biggest challenge, aren't they just going to focus their efforts on that? And the team was like, we don't think so. And I was like, all right, let's ask, let's see, And so sure enough, when it came back, one of the biggest areas where those two didn't line up was in staffing. It was about, we know we need more people, but we can't direct any effort there because we don't actually have the authority to grow our team. And I think that for me, that's what I love, Dan, the idea of like the practice or the program. I think that's what needs to happen, because in that scenario we have, and Hayley, you talked about the COO maybe perhaps running the system. I love that. That's where I think at that level we have actual executive leadership. Those kinds of decisions can be made, when we can recognize that as the system matures, we need to add things like real people doing support, like customer support, using how do we support our subscribers in a really good way. It's not just everybody jumps in and does it. I mean, you can start that way, but there needs to be a role that evolves there, right? And many other things like that require a bigger team.
Okay, makes sense. Well, I'm going to jump right in the question that the audience, the wonderful audience, has brought up here. And one of them is about aligning teams. Design systems are a great way of aligning teams, but what are, in your opinion, the best way to create alignment? Meetings don't seem to work. Proper documentation is never written. Regular check-ins don't work. What do we need to do processes-wise to make sure that we actually get to that alignment? What is the crucial part in there? Anybody wants to take it?
I'll go first.
I think that Hayley was first.
You go, Hayley.
Sorry. I was just going to say that some of the best ways that I've seen to align teams are actually to get them to work together. So, I can speak to an experience we had at Nike in the past year and a half, where we had 3 different parts of the business trying to make 3 different design systems. And in a lot of the times, the challenges that they were facing were very similar, but they were told by different business leaders maybe not to work together. And so one of the things that, we asked was, okay, so what are the biggest challenges that you all are facing? And it turned out that if we actually started by helping them work on some of their product features, that their business executives would let them work together. And we learned a lot from enabling those teams to be able to actually discover, for example, that, they didn't need to all have different buttons, because in that moment working on the product together, they found that those buttons were that similar. So sometimes it's just, devising very creative ways to, help these teams get traction by collaborating.
Dan?
What Hayley said. So
excellent.
Yeah, I'll stop there.
All right. Okay. More questions coming in, of course, and it's kind of related to what you said, Hayley, as well. What happens if companies have multiple brands? At which point would you recommend to have a single design system or multiple ones?
Y'all have any ideas on this one?
I mean, it depends, right? Of course. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think we've worked with organizations that have multiple brands and had success in building, alongside their teams, a single system to serve those. I think it sort of depends a little bit, I would say, maybe in the variety of experiences those brands need to create. I don't know. I think that's probably, it's a lot. It just takes some work to understand the needs, Dan, got something?
There's a great talk that Amy Hoop just gave at Clarity where one of the things that jumped out at me and kind of stuck with me was she said that we have to recognize that there are almost always systems in place before we make one. Like we just don't recognize them as such. So you know, so a lot of times our companies are like, well, okay, we're going to make our first design system. And it's like, if you talk to any engineer or any designer, they have their individual systems. Maybe groups of people have like, they just don't call it a design system. They call it like, oh, it's our starter kit, or it's our boilerplate, or they don't have a name for it because they don't even recognize it as such. But I think that's the first step, is like, there are those systems. And in order to create like a system of systems, you have to first recognize that there are ones that already exist. And then secondly, like Hayley was saying earlier, you have to recognize what is already common. You know, if you like when you get people to work together, even just doing an audit and going like, well, we're all using the same green. We just call it different things. They call it green, they call it apple, they call it shamrock, but it's all the same green. So can we then, and that alignment needs to be facilitated then. It doesn't need to be created. And I think that's the heavy lift, is like when you think you have to create it from scratch, it's hard. But if you can recognize that there's already alignment there, just that needs to be canonized, maybe that's an easier step for lots of teams.
Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a woman whose title was Design System Archaeologist. And I love that, because it is kind of what it sounds like. It's digging through what all the product teams have already done, all the great work that's already being done, identifying things that could be really valuable for other teams, bringing those into the system, you know, and in doing so, you're turning those folks into advocates for that work. You're sort of like appealing to their ego a bit. Hey, you've done this amazing work. Let's get it. Let's make it available to the rest of the company. You know, they're becoming an advocate. They're becoming a contributor. They're becoming a subscriber, like all in that one interaction, you know? So I think that's really just a brilliant way to approach it.
And just because you're talking about archaeology, it seems like somebody might have listened to you and they came up with a question that fits just well the bill. We have more than 5 different component libraries and foundations from the last 10 years. How would you approach bringing this all together in one single unified design system? Where would you even start? Maybe that's a question to Dan or Hayley. Dan?
I'll start. I mean, the first question to me would be like, do you have to? Because I think a lot of times it's a given that like, oh yeah, we have multiple design systems, we need to create one to rule them all. I'm like, you don't have to. So that's the first assumption. You know, Ben kind of talked about in cultures there are underlying assumptions, and in design system culture, that is often one that like we need to have one, and that one is going to be the thing. It's like, well, that actually might be true, but to get to that one is going to take you 10 years. You actually might be better off, you know, spending 4 years with multiple ones, and that might get you farther. So there's more to it than that, but I'll stop there and hand it off to Ben and Hayley.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would just build on what Dan is saying, as well as if you do find yourself in a scenario where you have multiple systems and you recognize the opportunities of consolidating those things. I mean, I think a part of it is starting to get those teams together to have those opportunities to have conversations about, and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but like what teams have in common, and look for those opportunities to find what's shared amongst things, as well as like actually differentiating. I mean, if they're using different platforms, if they're building in different frameworks, and there's a good reason for it, because the products they're actually making are significantly different, or the context of use is significantly different, then I think it's also important to recognize those differences, and to Dan's point, not force fit things into a single system that don't actually work together.
Can I add one thing, Vitaly?
Sure, go.
Culturally, there's like a big impact in that scenario, right? If you've got all these different sort of systems, or whatever they're being called, you know, across an organization, and there's a belief that we need to create one system to rule them all, what you're doing is you're creating competition inside the company. These teams now see each other as competition, and that, in my mind, culturally is actually a huge risk. The one I in the presentation I mentioned, there was one team that I talked to that their design system subculture was not on the left side of those quadrants, and it was a team that was operating in the bottom right, because they were one of 20 design systems that had been discovered inside this organization. And they were trying to be the one system to rule them all. So they were operating in this bizarre way. It was like wildly competitive. and I just, the kinds of things they were trying to do, it just felt to me like a really unhealthy risk, very risky place to be. I love systems because they put us on the same team, and that's what I think is powerful about the idea of having one system. But I agree that it doesn't have to be that way, and that it might take you years to get there.
Can I add one thing to what Ben
Sure,
was saying too? I think there's this counterintuitive nature with systems that the larger the organization, the larger the system we need. And it's actually, I found that to be the opposite, which is, I love the way that Hayley put it, which is, in order to get these teams to work together, we have to find out what's in common. The larger your organization, honestly, the less you have in common, right? If you think about a design system that has to support just web, you can make lots of really good web things. But a design system that has to support web and native iOS and native Android, there's actually going to be less in common across those. So the larger, the more the breadth, actually the smaller the design system is going to be. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that idea. So if you have 5 systems and you're trying to consolidate them, the consolidation is probably going to be a smaller system than any of them, as opposed to a larger system than any of them.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point indeed. There is, of course, a lot of questions coming in. Maybe just let's take 2 more, and then let's call it a day. One that came up was, how do you show the value of the design system to the top management level? Are there any proven KPIs that can be used? How to fight for the design system budget or cultural change in organization? Well, Ben, go for it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so there were a couple questions there. One on demonstrating value to leaders. I mean, it's like a common, maybe sort of sales tactic, which is to know your audience, right? So like, and at least in my experience, doing some work to understand what a specific leader values is actually the key to communicating the right thing to them, because systems can offer all kinds of value, right? And it sort of depends on what's important to a specific leader. So that's kind of the work that we would probably do, is try to get a good understanding of each of the folks that we need to talk to in leadership, and probably have those conversations separately, and sort of frame the system in a way that it actually offers a solution to a problem they're trying to solve. That's kind of the sort of generic answer in my mind. I'll let Hayley or Dan take the others.
Dan, I know you've been doing some stuff about measuring systems.
You want to go first, or you want to take it?
No,
first?
you go for it.
Okay. So, I plug. I just posted a video on Instagram about this, which is the way that most people sell design systems is, here's what a design system would get us if we had one. And that's like selling vaporware to your stakeholders. Like, if we had a design system, we could save a week of work, or 2 weeks of work, or $1 million, or 100,000. Like, and it's all speculative. A much better way to sell your design system is to say, here's what it did do, which means that you have to have a design system and use it before you get approval to have it and use it. I'm a big fan of rogue missions. I'm a big fan of doing work under the radar in a small way, in a way that could scale. So basically what you got to get buy-in on is scaling the design system, not creating the design system. I feel like that's a big misstep that I see a lot of teams make, is like, they try to get buy-in to create something, which is very difficult to do. It's possible. It's just hard. It's much easier if you go to your leadership and you go, listen, for the last 6 weeks under the radar, we've been working on this thing, and it actually meant that we saved 2 weeks in our sprint. So if you let us do this officially, we could save 12 weeks on the next sprint if we do this a little bit larger. I've seen many more stakeholders and VPs say yes to that pitch than to the, like, imagine we got 8 people on a team and we spent a whole year making a system of components. They're like, what are you talking about? So it's much easier to get buy-in on momentum that's already going than on it in the first place. The last thing I'll add to that is, like, think about it like pitching a VC on a new startup. What VCs always look for is traction. Like, how many users do you have? 0. But if we built this thing, we would have a lot more. No, thank you. I don't want to fund it. But VCs will look at something and go like, whoa, you already have 10,000 users in the first week. Okay, let's pour some gasoline on that, and let's see how far it goes now. So the more traction you have, the better it's going to be to get buy-in on even more traction.
I would just add a couple more things too onto this one. I think it's a really great question. 2 things that I've had success with is, one, actually bringing real, to Dan's point, bringing real feedback as well from users on a system that we already have. And we used to do something at Airbnb and at IBM called the love letter breakup letter. We had design system users write love letters to why they thought it was really working and also why they would break up with it. And then we would have those read out loud in videos to executives, that storytelling was actually really powerful and got us some investment. The other side of it too is making sure that you don't have to necessarily go to investment with just your leadership in product or wherever you sit. Oftentimes brand marketing, growth, other parts of the business actually really care about systems too. So if you can start to create sort of this tipping point where there's many people asking for system needs and that you can do this kind of work together, I think that building that outside in influence helps persuade those conversations.
Right. Fantastic. So maybe let's just go with the last question, because there are actually two which are actually similar. So let's just wrap that up there. One came from Serge. When is the design system ready to promote it across organization, in an early phase or slightly later? And that's related to that, Adam Borov is wondering, do you have any general advice when the design system bottom initiative should be turning into something more official? Kind of goes in a similar direction as well. So would you say, at which point would you recommend to say that, okay, we have a design system in place, it's kind of, it's been an experiment that seemed to be working. When do you feel comfortable enough to push it up to other layers in the organization?
I'll take that because I want to plug something that Ben has done. My general guideline is as early as possible and no earlier. And what I love whenever I say that to teams, they're like, cool, weird idea, man. And so then, like, what do you mean by that? So then I pull up, Ben and the Sparkbox team have made this awesome graph that I reference all the time, which is, I think Ben, it's called the design system efficiency curve. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that when you first start with a design system, there's some amount of time where it actually just makes you less efficient, right? Because you're like learning how to use a new tool and you're like, it's not quite, it's just clumsier because it's unfamiliar, it's new. But then at some point it turns from there and you're like, oh, this actually saved me a day of work. And then eventually it saved me like a couple of days of work and then a week of work. There's a turning point right there where it crosses into the positive axis. That's the point. That point is different for every organization and every team. What I try to do with the teams that I work with is have that point be as early as possible. And we try to measure that in as small of a way as possible. So the guideline that I set with teams is like, if it saves one day of work, now it's time to release. Right? If we think that this will save an engineer or a designer one day of work, let's show it to them. Before that, then it's like, it takes a day to install. So it's not going to save me that day of work. But even like, oh, it's easy to install. It took a couple of hours. And then that's the thing that you find out in a usability test is like, you watch people use it and you go like, how clumsy was it? So you have to have some beta users who are like willing to lose a day, with you at first. But to me, that's the turning point. And I love that graph, Ben. Thank you for making that. That's the turning point, is whenever it crosses or starts to cross into the, into that positive part of the axis, probably a good time to share it with some folks.
I'm going to write that down, I think. That's great. Hayley, Ben, any additions to that?
I think that's a great answer. Nothing to add.
Yeah, I would just build on that too by saying, there's the minute that you start delivering teams value, is a great time to start sharing it. I also think that you could start sharing it as you're creating it, because you should be co-creating these things with the teams in the first place. That may not be the point at which they're actively using it, but if you can get them, even I just with my team this past few weeks, they were doing some testing for a rollout that they have, and they had never done testing with other teams like that before the big rollout. They'd done some automated testing, but like actually getting it in users' hands, and they learned so much from it. So, as soon as you got something, I think it's worth sharing, at least for the feedback.
Excellent. Well, then maybe if I may, just one final question, very, very short answer if I can. I'm just always a bit curious. We have this wonderful group of people here in the digital space environment, whatever you want to call it. I'm just curious if I could ask you if you have, let's say, a dream project. So if you imagine you could be working on anything, you could be designing a design system, building a design system, establishing it in I don't know, anything from NASA to government, anything really. Do you have like a particular dream project that you ever wished you could only be working on? I think Dan has one.
That's a tricky question. Well, first, I thought you were going to ask about sushi because I was jealous that you asked Haley about that. We could talk sushi for a while. Dream project's tough because I've got a chance to work on my dream project, which was actually working with Haley and some of the folks at Nike. I've been wanting for that for a long time. I got a chance to do that. So
I didn't know that.
Now it is.
We haven't discussed it earlier before that.
I mean, now I think my dream project would be building a design system for the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay, we'll be in touch. All right, Haley?
I would love to do some, I guess you could say a design systems work, but I'm going full scale and would be great to work with like a local government. I love cities, studying cities. So any kind of city work, bring my way.
No problem. I'll make some calls. Ben?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a really tough one. I think for me, it's not necessarily about the organization as much as it is about the individuals there. So I think I'm looking to work with organizations that are just hungry to like actually create change, and that's what I think. There's a lot of power in a system in that way. It can create unity. It can give us like an actual way to have real conversation about things that are actually kind of hard to talk about sometimes. So that's really vague, but if I can find some people, yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to do my research then, Ben.
Okay.
That sounds good to me. Well, thank you so much for joining, Haley, Dan, Ben. It was a pleasure, as it always is. I'm very much looking forward to see you in person, eventually, soon, hopefully, very soon, indeed. And thanks everyone for joining. Of course, please don't run away just yet. Please, give a couple of emoji of your choice. Whatever your favorite emojis, please drop it in the chat so we can observe a rain of emojis streaming our way. But in the meantime, Haley, Dan, Ben, thank you so much for joining.